This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, Aaron and I switch up our questions, talking about our love-hate relationship with institutions and the rules of choosing a name.
Woo! And isn't it ironic that this is what an Aaron sounds like? Well, Joey's not here. What do we do for a blank? Is this just a blank space for where what a Joey would sound like?
It's just silence. Like, right? Ha! It would never exist. We're just going to keep talking because that's what a Joey would sound like.
Just got zinged.
Beep, beep, beep.
Wow.
Sorry.
Joseph is going to come back next week and he's going to have thoughts for that heat.
I hope
And we
laughed.
also have, okay, he better have. I'm sure he will. We are also joined by executive producer and all around just kind-hearted soul, Jess Vander. This is what a Jess sounds like.
This is Jess. That's right.
I messed up the intro. I'm not very good
okay.
without our
great.
Joey.
We're doing great.
Here. We're doing great.
I like that we've done a rotation now where it was you and Joey, and then me and Joey, and now you and me.
It's true. We've had, as the crisp leaves of fall crumble with a slight brown tinge, schedules get a little bit crazy. So we get to hang out in rotation styles, and it feels good.
The nonsense do-si-do.
The nonsense. Oh, the no-si-do? The no-si-do? Nonsense-do. I love it. I have a question, Jess, and it's firstly, before we get into questions, it is, do we have any housekeeping? House is clean? Cool. Shut the doors, close the blinds, house is clean. So you had a very fun idea that I think we're going to get a little experimental on the podcast today.
It's true.
Yes?
We are.
I'm just so excited for this. So, it's so bad every time, but I like the no's and the so's. So how we're going to do this. So I've got a little, I've had some stuff that I've been thinking about, and then you're going to have a question about it. Yeah?
That's right.
And then we'll flip the script for the second one. Yeah.
Yes.
This is good. Cool with the voice of the flipping of the scripting. So, I've spent a lot of time this week being sort of consumed with the drama that is the downfall of OZ Media.
I had never heard of OZ I maybe that like says something that I had never heard of it. But
it says something about OZ more so than it says anything about you.
I see. Okay. But I also am extremely not online, so fair to say. Fair. But okay, what is this? What is OZ?
Yeah. So OZ is a news empire. We'll use that in the loosest bunny-eared quotes that can exist. That was launched in the 20-teens, the early 20-teens. And they were sort of a darling of Silicon Valley. Everybody, money was being piled onto them and sort of catching up with their founders' vision for a totally new type of news ecosystem, and one that could allow for stories that were underreported but highly relevant for the next generation of news consumers and readers to engage with.
Sounds like a modern startup.
Yes. If everything that we hear about Theranos and WeWork and all of that, there are echoes of that in this downfall that's happened for OZ in the past week, which is that I believe it is still alleged that the COO of the company pretended on a call to be a representative from Google and told Goldman Sachs during a funding round meeting that they were doing great and that they had really great viewership and listenership and readership. And it was great. And so they should fork over $40 million to continue building OZ. Well, the New York Times broke that this all went down, that somebody faked being the person from Google during this funding round. And so within 2 days, OZ, this mini media empire, collapsed. Sort of. Because they said they were closed. And then 2 days later, they said, just kidding, this is going to be our Lazarus moment. And if anyone is not as enamored with this story as I am, You can do just a quick Google search for OZY in the news, and you will be inundated by stories from New York Magazine to the New York Post to Forbes to Deadline to Axios. It's all over the place, and it's sort of, I think, a little bit of like the news media eating the carcass, or maybe just the gazelle that has a broken leg right now. There's a lot of excitement in watching this next moment of wizardry fail. So I guess I'll leave you with that, Jess. And I guess I'm curious, what's on your mind when you hear that?
What is my question?
What is your question?
Yeah, do you have any questions? It's like, this is like the professor's segment where it's like, any questions? That's just what's happening. Yes, I have a question.
I love
Jess Vander, host of and Nerd Herder on the Critical Nonsense podcast. I just like to ask that this whole phenomenon is like the weirdest thing, not a question, but I'm just observing, just the weirdest thing. And I want to know, like, what does it say about us that we have this love-hate relationship with institutions and this need, but never actually wanting to follow through, disrupting them?
I know, right? I have this. Yes,
like that. The whole is like the most. You know, is this an Alanis Morissette ironic or actual irony that the traditional news media, you know, quote unquote, the New York Times is the one that's being like, y'all are fake. You're broken. You called us broken, but you're broken. You know what I'm saying?
You're broken. You're fake news.
Yeah, fake you know?
News. It is weird that like there's so many. Like we've been tussling with institutions in general for a while, especially over the course of last year. I think we on the podcast started talking a little bit about that earlier this year too, and I think that like. It's so uncomfortable, and it's just like it's a reality in any society, but I think it's like enhanced in a representative democracy that you have to have faith that the people behind the larger institutions in and around your life will do the things that you need them to do at the times you need them to be done, or at least you have to hold out hope that will happen, because I think you're totally right. There's something really insightful but perhaps naive or crass about OZ originally coming out with this huge branding campaign and saying like news is broken. Like cool, like okay, accurate, maybe, cool, yeah, not mad about that. But like it of course doesn't answer what are the causes for that and why you're the solution to it. And I think that's, I mean, this is such a brand strategy way to think about it, but it's like you got no RTBs, bruh.
Yeah, like, why should I believe you? It's also, it takes me to the conversation that we had when Joey was inspired by the art of motorcycle maintenance and fixing leaky faucets and repair, and how like there's something really that infatuates us with the idea of like all of our problems can just go away if it's new. Like the new thing can just fix the thing, except the problem is like the new thing has so many of its own problems. It has maybe none of the credibility that the old thing has built up. And so all of a sudden the promise that the promise is too good to be true in a lot of times, where the thing that starts out actually doesn't have it all. Yet, if you give it enough time, like Netflix, for instance, like if Netflix came out swinging, being like, we are gonna be the new frontier of watching anything, people be like, all right, you mail order DVD company, like, right. Good luck. But then there was enough time for it to start to actually fix some of those problems and develop itself. I don't know. It just, there's a thing here about how we handle and can make space for growth in brands or companies that we have a lot of or little expectation of. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's about expectation having. I don't know.
I mean, we definitely have such a weird relationship with progress. Like, and I say that because I think about Silicon Valley being a place that is built on imaginative futures of tomorrow that don't yet exist. Like, so much of that entire space is built on imagination and trying to get people to see the unseen. And that's what we've all been living through for the past, for a very long time. And it's certainly the reason why this story has struck a chord so much, I think, with that set, is that we do believe that the problems will be solved through newness because we've lived through such an amazing leapfrog moment of what none of us could have imagined. And yet we don't seem to really, at the same time, we are very afraid of the future. Like, that's kind of the other flip side of it. Like, we are very, very conservative as, in the grand scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that from like a human being perspective, human beings are oriented biologically toward stasis, towards things remaining the same as opposed to things being infinitely different, with the one potential difference being evolutionary biology, but that's a different conversation to have. I do think I'll send a link. There's some really good stuff about chaos and how evolutionary biology might fit into that.
Oh, okay.
Just Joey's not here, so I gotta. Yes.
Little Joey plug. Okay, bye.
Exactly. And I do what I worry about, I guess, is that, and this is, I think, just sort of a question of about when an institution is considered an institution, is we always will have to ride this line between questioning the status quo and with intention building whatever's coming next to make it better. But what happens when certain things are right the way they are and you have to let it be? Do we even know? Should we ever let anything be?
This is where it's like, what if it's okay to just be comfortable that Coca-Cola is a perfect beverage, except for the fact that it's probably very bad for us. And in that way, it is a deeply imperfect beverage. But you know what? The recipe and the trade secret and all that stuff, like that, there are some things that the stasis is welcome, whereas other things, like, we have plenty good reason to be restless, but also there practically is plenty good reason to need to be patient in solving the thing. I feel like that's some of the things. It's not even like we should just leave well enough alone, but it's because the change we seek literally cannot happen overnight because it is too complex a problem to solve, and people are working on it. And then in those moments, whom do we yikes, someone tell me, do we want to be working on that problem? The person, entity, thing that has been working on it for a really long time, or somebody new, bright-eyed, visionary? It's almost like what is the type of ideal that we want leading the way to solve the problems we have?
Which, like, it's almost impossible to have a conversation about institutions without having a conversation about trust. And you just like sparked it, where there's this gap for me between, it doesn't matter whether the person, and it's sort of going to the point about like who are making up these institutions. Are they working in my own best interest or not?
Right.
You never, like, I don't know who's currently working in the Department of Justice in the same, like, I don't know them personally. I don't know what they are about. I don't know the person that is making Topo Chico right now, like, which is so good. I love Topo Chico with lime.
Is that not just a bottled water? I'm sorry,
but
what is it?
It is a delicious bottled water.
It's delicious
water.
Sparkling.
Yeah, like, we can. This is a conversation.
Oh no, I'll take this
about-
diversion. What is it?
Yeah. Okay. Let's run down this road for a
Let's
minute,
just
and then
go
we'll come
down
back
this
to trust in institutions. So there are lots of different types of sparkling water that are defined usually by like the size of the bubbles in them, like the actual carbonation that they have, as well as, of course, flavor. But even within those flavor formulations, you have differences that can enhance the beverage's natural flavors. Like citric acid can make certain flavors taste better, even in a relatively unflavored sparkling water. But then on top of that, you also have the packaging making a very big difference. If you have glass versus plastic, you can have a difference in the types of bubbles that you're able to contain within that container because of the rigidness of the material.
That makes sense.
And that says nothing about closures too. If you've got a crimp top versus a screw top, plastic ROPP, roll-on pilfer-proof cap, like all of these are going to take you to different bubble-like experiences that you can have. Topo Chico nails it. Very, very good.
And they have glass bottle with crimped top?
Spot on.
Oh,
yes.
Ding, 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 ding.
It's really good. If you try like a San Pellegrino that's got a screw on top versus the larger like 1.5 liter bottles that have crimp tops, you will taste a difference in the water itself because the actual carbonation amount needs to be different to accommodate for shakeage during shipping and the closure on top that needs to be able to stay in place and not pop off. So you can have the same brand of sparkling water, but from bottle to bottle, it can and will taste different, which is why we also have difference in like, soda fountain beverages versus bottled beverages, sometimes tasting differently because your carbonation can change the overall mouthfeel and taste.
Pellegrino, I'm discovering right now, is owned by Nestle, and Topo Chico owned by Coca-Cola.
There you go. There you go.
Back
at it again.
Although it originally was a Mexican brand.
Yes.
That was purchased only a few years ago.
Spot on. And it's expanded into hard seltzer a little bit. Lots of delicious flavors.
Wow.
Topo Chico with lime. Delish. So that was really fun because where I was going with all this was the best bubble diversion. Bubbler diversion. When you don't know the people that are behind these institutions that are making these major decisions on your behalf, you always have a trust gap or some sort of like space between what you can know and what you can hope they're going to actually do on your behalf. And so like having any sort of trust in that means that you kind of have to have trust in the unknown. You don't like, you can't have trust in the known and assume that people that you don't know are going to work well on your behalf. But if you orient yourself toward the unknown, if you believe in the unknown, if you believe in the same unknown that all the future is writ with, then in theory, you can still like live your life and trust that like things will work out because there's somebody out there who's doing the right thing. And maybe that's an indication that we like will never be able to hold on to any institutions. Maybe it is an indication that we just fundamentally will need to keep challenging them because we have to be comfortable in the unknown. And that means we have to keep moving forward.
Point of order. Just the other day on my project team, we were talking about the Lindy effect, otherwise known as Lindy's law, which is the theory that a thing that exists already, like the longer it exists, the more likely it will continue to exist for a long time. Benoit Mandelbrot, who's like the mathematician who did all the fractal stuff, totally awesome dude, also has another version of this where he describes it. I'm just reading Wikipedia, hold up. However long a person's past collected works, it will on the average continue for an equal additional amount. When it eventually stops, it breaks off at precisely half of its promise, which is to say, like, I think it is ultimately deeply deteriorating and isn't what it is. But it's not like that contends with the thing you're describing, which is yet the institution persists because there is a reason that many persist, not just simply because they have already persisted, but there might be something behind their longevity. What do you make of that?
I love this because I think about this quite a bit when it comes to things that were around before different people were born. And how it's like if an institution, idea, a thing was around before one was born, it's really easy to render that as it's been around forever. Or that's just literally been the experience that I've had in the world that I've grown up in and lived in. And therefore, like, why would this be challenged? And I think that I might have brought this up last week, or maybe I brought it up earlier this week, but I went on a hike last weekend and learned quite a bit about astrophysics.
Yes, we talked about this.
Yes. And so realizing the state of gender and race within the science community, the state that it was in specifically around 1912, 1913, 1914, and realizing how much change happened to the science and to the institution and the makeup of the institution over the next 50 years really had me, as I'm sitting up at this observatory, like, looking at a really, really cool set of telescopes. They were awesome. They were really cool.
Gosh, so cool.
Just realizing what it was like and questioning what it was like to believe or grow up at a time where you didn't know that the universe is always expanding, or you didn't know that there are multiple universes and galaxies, and to realize that, like, oh no, this was still kind of veering on the edge of heresy. Like, astrophysics at that time was really still coming out of an era where we were talking about like astrometry, which is like star charts to figure out how to help sea vessels navigate, as opposed to thinking about what the like makeup from a chemical perspective of stars are and how they twinkle and how they interact with each other and how galaxies are formed and gravity and like all these different elements that had just been like put to the side. I'm bringing all that up because I think we can, for the sake of this conversation, consider astrophysics an institution and imagining what that would have been like, what I feel that is like now, and the things that I don't question about it might be an indicator of one of the reasons why so many institutions exist. And it's because, well, they were already here. And in theory, if they're already here, there's a reason they were already here. And if they've been around for a really long time, there's got to be a bunch of reasons why they were already there. And that's so wild.
Yeah, almost. The way I'm hearing it is almost like if we believe that there's something to work with here, like if we believe that maybe it's not got all the answers, maybe there's still a ton unknown, whatever, but this quote unquote institution, be it a company or a field, but if we believe that there's something to work with, that is where the thing persists. Is like we give it a chance to keep evolving and growing and or sticking to what it's good at in the instance of Topo Chico or Coke, right? Because we want, until we need it to change, we believe that it can keep going. I don't know. I love that. Something like that, right?
Yeah, that's like it's a very optimistic and charitable view of where we are going, like what could be next. And if there weren't such a strong relationship between optimism and change, like such a strong correlation, then I think that things wouldn't change. Like nothing would change, right? Like we would fall victim to the most absolute version of Lindy's Law, maybe.
Yeah, and also it maybe presents why we have then, bringing it back to the original question, this love-hate experience, because when we lose hope and we feel the dread of like, oh no, are we ever going to be able to fix some of these things, or are we going to get past, and where we start introducing doubt, I think that's where the allure of the disruptor starts being extremely, I mean, none of this is like particularly revelatory, but I don't know, like if that's what it says about us and our relationship with it, right? It's what it's saying is the general sentiment is like, I don't know if I believe anymore. My optimism is fading. Can you do it? Show me you can.
You know what? I think it is revelatory. And I think what it revelatorizes, what it reveals, I just wanted to make it more complicated, is
what it reveals.
What it reveals is such a wonderful, is this idea that leaning into the future, well, I guess the relationship between hope, optimism, fear, and stasis. Because I've been talking a lot lately, or hearing from a lot of folks around, climate change. And in some ways, it's a very similar. Comes over here, there. That little thing.
All those words related to it, for instance. I'm sorry, I interrupted
just like
you.
One or two things. But there are a lot of conversations that I remember folks in New York in particular having a couple years after 9/11 about whether or not you should move to New York and whether it's safe, because there's a moment that terrorism could attack or happen at any moment. And a lot of the conversation that I'm hearing now about climate change is about, well, where should you live? Like, where should you settle roots if you know that you're all, like, no matter where you live, the effects that we have, that the results of the effects that we are going to
Words. Why
did I literally lose the ability to use words? The effects of the decisions that we have made that are resulting in all these different climate change catastrophes that are happening no matter where you live. There's this question of where can you live safely? And the extreme in both of those cases is the same, which is either like you sit still exactly where you are and don't move, because if you sit still and you don't move, then the terrorists won't get you.
Right.
Or conversely, just move all the time. Just constantly not be in one space, and maybe you can outworld the world, and like maybe if you're here in the summer and here in the fall, you can avoid the hurricane and then you can avoid the thing. But ultimately, it goes back to that thing where like we choose optimism by and large over and over again, or hope, or some sort of forward propulsion, even though I don't know many people that are optimistic about climate change. I don't know many people that feel that this is going in the right direction or that it's going to be turning around soon.
This is so interesting. It makes me think of the fight, flight, or freeze response in like moments of terror, and the idea, like associating this of like freeze is like, well, I'm gonna trust in the institution to solve it because I don't know what else to do, and then flight is like, it's got to be something totally different because there's no way what we've got now, and then fight feels like the middle ground. I mean, I don't know if that's not actually true in real life in fearful moments, but I don't know. I just could fight in this instance be things are imperfect, but we'll have to work on it, like work in progress, and let's keep ourselves accountable in case we need to change courses at any moment because the fight's no longer working and you can no longer move there because no matter where we are, everything will explode soon.
100%.
It's already exploding.
Yeah. Except for upstate Michigan. You can go there, and apparently that's going to be the spot for the next
Pure
50
Michigan.
years.
That's the campaign. Pure Michigan's campaign, which is like the statewide campaign of how blissful Michigan is to live in and travel to. It's also like Michigan, so pure, it's literally the only place on earth that you can survive.
Yes.
Oh, well, can we end on an optimistic note, Aaron?
Yeah, let's do it. What do you think it is? What's the optimism?
What's the optimism?
Also, how do you end an optimistic note when the entire orchestra was optimistic all along? That was terrible. I'm so sorry. This is such a bad dad joke.
I hope that over time, the things that should persist do. That feels like that's my, if I wish anything, my optimistic wish is the things that should will, because time will force the issue. And if something like OZ was meant to be, then it would have lasted. That's like a very putting my hands in fate, but I feel like that, I don't know.
I mean, when we're talking about things this big, we're talking about like the kids and the kids' kids and the 8 generations from now kids. We're always just here for a beat. So I sit right beside you on that delightful bench overlooking the sunrise of hope in our future.
And even if the thing that lasts is the fight, then there you go.
There's the bald eagle. It's going by. It's got talons out.
In the last 2 weeks, 2 babies have entered into the world that I know personally. I mean, I have not met these babies, but I know them second connection babies. And both of them are named Wally. Their nicknames are Wally. And I can't stop thinking about it. This idea that there is this theme of naming that can happen over the course of generations. Jessica was the top name in Pennsylvania in the year that I was born. And then I think the year prior was Lisa. Could have been a Lisa. Imagine. I think I'm not a Lisa in personality, but you never know. That and names in general, we've talked about on last Cutie Corner, in fact, about the power of sharing a name with someone, and also the identity that you personally attach to your name. But what we didn't really get to talk about is how we are given a name, and the decision that goes into deciding on one is so fraught with so many different factors, be it, you know, the parents' own insecurities about when they were a kid and they were made fun of, or, you know, class implications, you know, racial differences and cultural norms for how you name your children. And it just, the burden of naming is so tremendous. And for the conclusion to be drawn that Wally is the answer right now, or that Jessica was the answer many years ago, is fascinating to me. And I don't know. I want to know what you think.
The question that it sparks for me is really, how do we all figure out the same rules of naming things at the exact same time?
Yes, right? It's almost like an unspoken triangulation that's happening, and what I mean, maybe we can unpack that in a couple parts, the first of which being, what are the rules of naming right now that led to two Wallys? I
wonder about this a lot, because, so I think I've talked about it before. My brother has an inspired by Swahili middle name that is not accurate.
I remember this. Remind me.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So long story short, his name in theory meant beautiful eagle in Swahili. And that's what he always thought. Until in his early 40s, we were talking to our parents and showed them a Google result that showed that that is not Swahili and it's spelled wrong. And it's just not, it doesn't mean beautiful eagle. So, you know, all of that was sort of unpacked. But, you know, at the time, I know that the story with him is that they wanted to name him after my dad's mentor, the guy that my dad looked up to the most. And then they wanted the middle name to be black. They wanted him to have blackness invested within him. And the blackest thing that they knew of was Africa. So it was like, you know, especially without necessarily, you know, having Google at your fingertips, like they went to the other smart people they knew and they found this thing. And when they thought about like who he could be and who he could become, a beautiful eagle sounded amazing. Something that soars super high, something that signifies strength, amongst all else. And then also coincidentally, something that is sort of synonymous with America. So there was something that was intentionally, I think, subversive about connecting that to him. Needless to say, there have not been a lot of Ugomas running around the US. And he, to this day, just uses you. He's very proud of who he is. He's proud of where he comes from. He's proud of his name. Proud of his name is an interesting one. Maybe he's not crazy about that middle name. Always puts you, and everybody says, "Oh, are you Ulysses? Is that your middle name?" And it drives him crazy because of Ulysses S. Grant, and it's like, this is weird. That is the different story. We spend a lot of time coming up with rules of name, or my parents came up in their era coming up with rules of naming that were infusing meaning and creating relationship, which is why my mom named me Aaron. She wanted us to both be close together forever. That was her thing, because she's Karen and I'm Aaron. She wanted it to rhyme. That was her deal. And then I got my middle name as my dad's other mentor, who is a very good friend who lives in Phoenix. Anyway,
Fairness.
All those, it's interesting to try to infuse that connection because you hear it so much when you hear about like, let's use a family name, or, you know, in some families, it's really customary to move middle names to become last names, to introduce new middle names, but those new middle names are intended to be old family names. Like there are a lot of rules around names that are just around trying to create this through line through time beyond generations that you never got to know.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like, while that's going on, you also have, what are the names that I haven't heard a lot lately, but if I said them, no one's going to raise an eye. And I don't know that Wally falls into either of those, which is so interesting, but I just don't know.
Okay. So while you're talking, I'm collecting some rules that I'm extracting from how you're even using your own family as an example, which is so interesting. The first is, what does it mean? What is the meaning of this name? And ideally attributing to that process, how could it mean, and how could that be twisted or altered over time? Because that's a pressure test, right? Like, is the meaning it carries right now something that I can imagine standing true if that's something I care about in a name? And or could someone else take that meaning away and swap it for something else and distort the meaning? Because I feel like a lot of people do try really hard to protect against distorting the meaning in a name, or unapologetically asserting the meaning of the name, like the example of your brother, at least the intention anyway, to be like, this is with purpose. Right? That's rule number one. That's rule number one. Rule. Oh yeah, go.
Well, you just excited me because I think that the relation, it sparks that thing where I think a lot of parents that I know, they think about, how is my kid going to get teased? That's like a really practical version of how the meaning could be distorted, but also like linguistically, what are all the things that they're going to get? And I think it's so interesting that, like, you know, as you're thinking about names, you've got this child like with you all the time, and you are literally the protector.
Yeah.
Like your body is the universe, and you are holding everybody at bay who could ever hurt this being that's happening. And I think that protective instinct that comes through even in a name, where we're like, that's going to be the first thing that when you have to start, like, that's the distance. That's when you come away from me and my body and my safety. And it's like, yeah, that's you having to navigate the world. And people, for all of their optimism that maybe they have in the future, fingers crossed, suck. Kids are mean. People are mean.
Yeah.
And they're really creative, and that's never good. So anyway.
So, well, this comes to another rule. No hierarchy. I'm making this up as I go. The other rule being, how will it stand out, asterisk, and where will it need to fit in? Because there is a whole balance, the tightrope of like, don't want to be so exotic with this name that people are like, what is that? And how do I spell that? At the same time, just pure, like, take meaning aside and just purely for the point of differentiation of having a name that no one else in the room is going to have, just because that's a distinguishing factor. But then again, right, what about where it creates work for that individual, at least in a certain context. It may create less work in other contexts, but what context do you imagine it being used in? And then is there a right balance to strike between standing out, being different, being distinct, and then being the name that everybody has?
And what it does to you to just deal with it as you grow up. Because, like, I think about kids that are born at different times of the year, for example, and how that changes the way that they're socialized in some ways. So, like, a ton of kids have September birthdays. And so there's always just like a cluster of birthdays around the beginning of the school year. And sometimes that makes those kids super, super like sociable, because they started school with birthday parties. Like that was a part of the experience growing up over time. And similarly, people that have really distinct names have to live with those distinct names, and they learn being married to someone with a very distinct name. I can say this from secondhand experience,
Secondhand
but very
exposure.
close.
Sure.
Secondhand
You've witnessed
exposure.
it. Primary source material.
Constantly. Primary source material. The question, it teaches you, I think, what it means to stand out. It teaches you that is something that you have control over, or that you have to be cognizant of. Maybe not control over is the right word, but I think that it makes some people, it can instill such a wonderful sense of individual pride and specialness. If you feel like you want to stand behind that name, but then there are other folks as well who feel that it teaches them to retreat or use a different name or something else that can fit in when it needs to, because they just don't want that. And I also think about people who change their names over time,
yes.
like whether it's a nickname or if you're transitioning, like all of these, the question about what name you use. Some people want to use the same name that they used before they transitioned. Some want to change it. Like, what it can say about how you define yourself within a society is so powerful, because it is second gift you're ever given. First gift you're given is life. Second gift you're given is your name. But then you have to decide, much like all gifts, what it's worth, when does it serve you, and when does it not, and what to do with it.
Yes, exactly. And what are the ramifications of doing something with it? I feel like the third rule I was circling around, and I feel like these are really overlapping, so forgive my poor framework, but to whom or what does it connect you is a thing that can be really interesting. Like, let's say you're named after an important person to your parents, and you, or even if not, let's just say that they put so much thought into your name and believe it to be so beautiful, and you hate it, and you change your name because you feel like something would better represent your identity. And it's interesting that people have a stake in your name, not just those who named you, but the name itself carries something. And was it with Joey that we talked about how people with a certain name over time, there's been was this some random study? I don't know if I'm just pulling something out of nowhere, but I seem to remember there being some kind of study that people assume the personality of a name that they are given, and that they share more things in common with other people of that name than the average person. There's something like
Fascinating. I'm gonna not challenge you on it. I'm really excited to read more about it.
I'm just gonna have to look into it later and see if I find it, put it into the show notes. But isn't just that idea that our name has tethers, and that we are deciding where or when we want to trim or reattach certain tethers.
I mean, we got to talk about last names when it comes to that.
Yeah.
I love this, because you've got questions of whose name do you take when you get married, if that is a question you want to ask. And then I know a lot of kids who grew up with hyphenated last names, because both parents felt like they wanted to keep their last names, but they wanted both to be represented within the child. And then especially when you threw in a confirmation name into that, because I went to Catholic school. That's
like 6 names right there.
So many names. It's so many names. And then you've also got, I think of like Ellis Island in particular, but people who change their last name, I guess more so to your second rule, but like, how is that name going to serve you in this next chapter of your life? And I always talk about my last name and how it was invented. Truly, I wish that Powers was like the name, but it was invented like three or four generations ago when a great grandmother was escaping town with an illegitimate son that someone didn't want to claim. So she chose a last name that was close to his, so that people would not know, but he would know and she would know, and that would be the thing. And thank God it was Powers. Lucille, you did a killer job. Thank you. It is the best last name.
It's such a good last name.
Oh, she nailed it.
Yeah, really. Incredible choice.
She's amazing. And yeah, I think that like in all of those moments, we are fundamentally creating or erasing tethers from people, whether we want to or not. And I think that it becomes very difficult to rebuild those tethers or reclaim them over time. In that story that I just told, had I not known that, and I didn't know that until I was in my like early 20s, my kid, like, well, I'm not gonna have kids, but if I had kids, they would never know that. And then it's just like, oh yeah, Powers. It's just like it was the name. And then you go on Ancestry and look up Powers and you'll find a Scottish crest. Because that's what I did for a coat of arms project when I was in middle school.
You're like,
and no one asked any
heritage.
questions. Yes. They're like, I mean, it makes some sense. I don't know that it makes all the sense that we thought it would. And so, yeah, those tethers matter, but also our identities are so monogenerational, let alone sort of like multi-generational. That's something. Where did Jessica, where did that come from? Do you know?
Where did Jessica come from? It didn't come from anywhere but for a name that my parents liked. I almost, from what legend says, is I almost was named Emily Caroline, but I was born and didn't look like one, and I looked like a Jessica, and so it was. And now I have a sister named Caroline.
You go.
But my middle name speaks to rule number 1, which the meaning, and rule number 3, the tether to my great grandmother, Daisy Lee, and my last name of Russian Ashkenazi descent. That was just confusingly overlapping with what a lot of Dutch last names are, but that was also an Ellis Island translation because the Russian name was too complicated. But too complicated. Right?
This. The people, the entity that we have in our heads that is the too complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the group that says the name is too distinct, or the group that says the name is too othered.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's real. It exists. Like there was a person at Ellis Island who filled that in and made a decision to change the name.
Yeah.
Just as much though as there is the imagined or the sort of projected bully of our kids in the future that we are trying to work around, and we're trying to outsmart them before they exist because we know they exist because we've internalized, and we know that voice so well of these people who sort of torture our names and pull them apart.
This is why all of my heart and earnestness believes, the whole the buzz from 2020 talking about De coldest to ever do it, Crawford.
No.
The football player.
Yes.
An incredible football player whose name could not be a more perfect name for an amazing athlete. And a family member was describing an interview with his mother, and his siblings don't have names like his, but his mother is like, something I just knew. I just knew that I needed to give him this name because he would be something exceptional. And if nothing else, above all of the rules and whoever says whatever is too complicated or uncomfortable because it's new or silly or I don't even know what, but there's just something about the intention behind a name and people trying their best to imagine a future that they can see ahead of you. And that is just like, it's just such a beautiful thing. And I don't know. If we're also trying to wrap this section on a positive note, I feel like it's the appreciation of the attempt of that gift to be something for us and not to get in our way.
Is this where I can just poke a little bit above the ribbon before we fully wrap? Because clearly we have to mention Beyonce. And I mean this both facetiously, but actually very right on the back, supporting exactly what you're saying, because there's a lot of conversation and debate around Black names, like names that quote unquote sound Black. And you sometimes hear people wonder, like, why would they ever name someone DeAndre? Like these names that seem coined or made up or mashups of different types of name together. Or, there was always a myth around Orangelo and Lemangelo and saying like, oh, that's just orange jello and lemon jello or something like that. And really being mean about these names, and there's so much loaded into there. It's like, oh, they're poor, they're not smart, they're too dumb to name their kids something that other people would recognize. And this is not news to many people, but it's actually about distinction. It's about this idea that this is the first being of this type that has been on the earth. Why would I name him after everybody else that has been around him or her? Like, give them a name that they can define themselves. Give them a mark they can leave on the world themselves. And you have a Beyonce who's out there. And now we will never not know who Beyonce is.
That's right.
And no one will ever laugh at Beyonce as a dumb name, or as a name that is loaded because it's too lower class. And also, like, there's just inherent racism in that. Like, those names being coded as black names, like, in and of itself, there are assumptions about denigration one in them. But
also, historically, names were lame. Names were entirely attached to, like, your lineage or what your profession was and whose child you were. Like, come on. I'm excited for new names that are a blank slate for you to paint on. Like, okay, maybe making it easy to spell is going to be helpful in some saving minutes here and there over the course of somebody's life. But what is the trade-off if you get the chance to embody your name and make it something? I think that's so cool.
That's awesome. Be your name.
Be your name, or don't. Be more than your name. If you like whatever you want, I don't know, do with it what you will.
Oh, that's so true. Your name is not you. You do you. Do you and do the best you that you know how to do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by Lime Topo Chico. Like, of course.
Obviously. We'd like to thank our recurring hosts and just some of my favorite people. Aaron Powers, you, Aaron, and Joey K. Meyer, who's not here. But I always love the opportunity to thank you. In these chances, I get to pretend to be Joey.
Man, and now I get to actually thank you, executive producer Jess Vander, and marathon Olympic nerf herder. You've continued to make nerf herding you've taken it to new levels, and I just hats off to you for that.
Nerfs.
I would also like to thank sound engineer and fixer of all Zoom recorders in the entire known universe, Alex Contel. Thank you, friend.
And special thanks to our source of comfort and programming coordinator, Les Jacobs. You're the best.
Oh, yes, Leslie, thank you. And, we could not do this without the production help of my favorite names, Sarah Gilbert and Nora Mestridge. Thank you for you, period.
And as always, I have nothing else to say. Thanks, Elen.
Thank you, Elen. Thank you. Special
thanks. Jinx, you owe me a Topo Chico.
Immediately.
With lime.
Immediately.
Or some other.
Lime.
I really don't think I've ever had it.
It's really good. Check it out. Whole Foods, they got it.
I would like to thank you again for enlightening me as to all of the different bubble sizes and textures that I need to be paying attention to. And it just feels like a space of mouthfeel in beverage that I haven't paid attention to, but now definitely will.
Oh, you are so welcome. Bubbles are the best, and I bid you a fair bubble. Oh goodness, I had so many really strong special thanks. I have to thank Alanis Morissette because I saw her in concert on Wednesday. And
what?
It was awesome. It was the Jagged Little Pill 25th anniversary at the Hollywood Bowl. It was everything.
And how is she?
How's her voice? She sounds exactly the same as she did 25 years ago. Either it was all so well pre-recorded that you couldn't tell, but I am 99% sure that wasn't the case. She looks like her whole head flips off of her neck when she sings, and she hit every note that you want her to hit. Oh, like, it was amazing. Her kids are adorable. So thanks, Alanis, for everything. Thank you, Hollywood Bowl, for that very delicious Wolf Session IPA. And thank you, India, thank you, terror. Okay, you can look up the song. You guys know. Okay.
Thank you for that. I would like to also thank parents everywhere for, trying to come up with a good name. Every single parent puts effort into this. Is just, every parent puts effort and thinks about the name.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
And I want to thank the 2 parents that named their kiddos Wally. One in particular that Jess and I both know of. And we are very, very excited because we know that those parents are likely listening right now. So we're really, really excited for you. You're amazing.
Oh, you're so amazing.
We love you, Connor.
Strong name. Yeah.
It is.
We love it so much. What else are we thanking? We're thanking hyphens for just bringing things together.
Yeah. This is when I get to thank you again, Jess. That's awesome. That's all I got. Thank you, because that right there is my favorite. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Bye.
That's it. Bye.
Perfect segue to leaving.
Sorry.
Who doesn't know how to goodbye now?
Oh, it's me. You're so right. I also recognize that I did do a Joey just then, which is that like I had one more thought and I had to get it in because it was just it's so lovely. And I will send in the show notes. There's a bunch of really interesting articles about like black names, and there's like all the stuff that's about like the blacker the name, the less likely you are to get hired and to be brought into a company.
Is just like
horrible.
All of the blind study tests, like
yes,
it's actually what it tells you is like that there like needs to be some kind of blindness in recruitment. Like I guess there's no way around it because no one is safe from like letting this bias creep in. And so
it's
yes,
wild. It's wild. And to that same point, like sometimes I heard recently that you should not put your address on your resume in certain towns so that people will not presume more about you,
where you're from. Totally.
Other articles that I've read about the names though is that it like there's I think it's in the New York Times. It's a breakdown of like the French origin of many of the coined black names of the like 80s and 90s in particular, because there's like definitely a motif that came out in that era that are different than the black names, quote unquote, from like the 60s and 70s, which were much more so African in nature because there was the Back to Africa movement and like everything with civil rights. There's a bifurcation of whether it should be American or African, like choose African things. And that's where my brother, like he was right at the end of all that in the late 70s. So like Ugoma.
Yeah.
That was a part
of it. Part of that like trend. How interesting.
Yes. And then my dad's middle name is Tyrone. And there's so much interesting stuff about how Tyrone used to be like a French aristocracy name and then eventually became synonymous with like blackness and black men. And I think in that same article, it breaks that down. So I'm excited to share that.
Like how pink used to be a dude's color?
Yes. Yes. And heels used to be dude's shoes.
See? Just like,
so
whatever.
Much.
Okay.